always on the forefront and for supporting all the work, excellent work and excellent collaboration between ICAR-IIFSR and Summit. So my sincere thanks. I'm not sure whether he is there, but he is there in front of me in the center of the picture. So I start this presentation. I'm not sure what I put together because I'm in the field and on road over past week. But let me try to justify the topic. And I also see my colleague friend Anthony. So hi, Anthony. And who will be complementing the presentation on similar aspect, having rich experience on natural resource management across the world. So without taking a lot of time, let me let me minimize this first because I don't know how to do it, but yeah. So the topic is the challenging, and we have challenges. So challenging the climate change effects on agriculture. And to do that, I think we need business unusual. I'm not sure. Yeah. So, some of you might have seen this slide quite a few times. I've been using, on the left side, this perfect storm, which was developed when we were developing the dry arc initiative. Anthony was involved with the CARDA. And you can see the challenges in the bottom. You see the climate change, which is challenging all of us, in one or the other aspects. A whole lot of issues on the water, on the biodiversity, land degradation, and of course, the population pressure. And when we talk about population, South Asia is a hot spot. Malnutrition, which is again a significant challenge, and in many of the areas there are a lot of conflicts and fragility because of all those challenges. And on top of that, when we talk about here in the region in India, the crop residue burning mediated air pollution and health effects are compounding. And on top of that, the COVID-19 is further challenging us, so making our life a bit complicated. So I think these are the kind of challenges, the kind of perfect storm we need to address. When we talk about climate change, the anthropogenic climate change has a significant effect on the global agricultural productivity growth. And this paper came out early this year, which analyzes the total factor productivity growth from 1960 through 2015. And you can see the impact of the anthropogenic climate change. That means human-induced climate change effects are leading to significant reduction in the total factor productivity across different regions. Of course, the effects are much more in Africa than other regions, but Asia is also sitting in between. So something like 30% reductions in the total factor productivity since 1961, which is, so average is 21%, which is equivalent to losing the 7 years of the productivity growth. And as I said, Asia or India is sitting at the global average. Now, there's another paper which came up, again early this year in Nature Food, which indicates that the food systems are contributing almost 1/3 of the global anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions, which is quite significant. And the data from 2015 indicates that it's 18 gigatons of the carbon dioxide equivalent per year globally, which is representing 34% of the total greenhouse gas emissions. And it's the largest, contribution is coming from agriculture and land use changes. And the remaining of this, I'm talking about the 18, gigatons. So largest is coming from agriculture of that part, and the remaining is coming from the supply chain activities in the food system. So I think we have to do a lot in terms of reducing those footprints. At the same time, you all are aware that we are in the United Nations Food System Summit process, which is going on, and that says that the agri-food system need transformation, and the transformation to ensure healthy food for all the people, healing and protection of the environment, respect and protection of the animals, safe and equitable employment for the food system workers, and vibrant economies without intensifying the crisis of the global climate change. So I think this UN Food System Summit, is there to track the progress towards our sustainable development goal commitments, and also develop the action plan for the future, how to achieve those sustainable development goals and how to achieve these objectives of the food systems. This I just got this morning from one of my colleagues, a paper in Rural 21, which depicts the food systems transformations, how those are critical or crucial for achieving the sustainable development goals. So interlinkages of the sustainable development goals in relation to the food systems and how they are contributing to the UN sustainable development goals. So you got three type of the farming or the food systems. You got subsistence, you got sustainable, and you got globalized. So we are more of like, globalized in many of the African countries. You got subsistence in some of the areas, you got sustainable one. So if you got sustainable, there's a clear linkage, that contribute to the zero hunger, and also there will be enabling conditions of different, goals which are contributing to the zero hunger. But if you got a subsistence food system, so there's a negative linkage with all those sustainable development goals sitting on the top of the slide. And even if you got a globalized food systems, you got a negative linkages with many of those sustainable development goals because of several factors. So just to let you know that if we are talking about achieving the sustainable development goals, the food systems transformation is something very, very crucial. Now, our challenge starts when we talk about the transformation of the food systems, because we are dominated by the smallholder farmers, and you can see this map, which again published in a paper early this year. See all the red areas, which are very, very smallholder farmers. And if you talk about Asia, over 450 million smallholder farmers support the bulk of the food supplies in the region. So I think if we are talking about transforming these smallholder systems, is there any problem? Okay. So please mute those who are not speaking. I think whatever we do, I think we have to think about the smallholder farmers. Without that, we cannot transform the food systems, cannot address the issues of the climate change, water, and other things. Now, coming to the South Asia, and South Asia has unparalleled challenges. We all know about it because it's one of the densely populated region in the world. And the region is most vulnerable to climate change, where natural resources are 3 to 5 times, more pressurized than the rest of the world. We need more nutritious food from less, and moreover from the degraded natural resources, and with more climatic variability. So those are the challenges which we have to face and we have to address. So for adapting agricultural systems to the effect of climate change, for smallholder farmers of South Asia need innovations. And when we talk about innovations, we talk about technological innovations, we talk about institutional innovations. So when we talk about innovations, we must be mindful while innovating what we innovate, that we should not be undermining the power of the smallholder farmers. And innovations should not be thought of from the perspective of the size of the farms, rather from a business model having win-win for all. So that's what we need to think keep in mind while innovating. So we need business unusual approaches and the innovations which contribute to the local priorities for building resilience to the climatic risk, and also contribute to the global priorities. So think globally, act locally philosophy. I think that's what is needed when we talk about the innovations. So coming to the technological innovations, there has been a lot of advancement in technologies. But when we talk about innovations, there are 4 steps of the innovation process. So we need to observe the problem. We need to develop the solution for that problem. And then once we develop the solution, we have to try it out. And then we go for implementation. So that's a simple process of the innovations when we talk about the technological innovations. Now, coming to the technological innovations, when we talk about, and I'm narrowing it down to the management factors, which are critical for transitioning towards sustainability and addressing the perfect storm, what I shared in the beginning of the presentation. And from a natural resource management perspective, I think if we put 5 factors which are important, the tillage and crop establishment, the biomass management, the water management, the nutrient management, and waste and weeds and all those management, and they are contributing significantly when we talk about energy or the cost and the adaptive capacity to the climatic risk, mitigation of the greenhouse gas emissions, the productivity of the food systems, and of course the soil health. So all those contribute significantly to these indicators. Now, coming to when we talk about the tillage, crop establishment, biomass management, and all those things, conservation agriculture comes in immediately in mind. So we did this meta-analysis last year on conservation agriculture for sustainable intensification in South Asia, which was published in Nature Sustainability. And based on the analysis, we see that if you implement conservation agriculture based sustainable intensification in the region, that directly or indirectly contributes to 10 sustainable development goals. So it's not only addressing the issue of the climate change, but also issue of the poverty, the hunger, the health and well-being, the gender equality, clean water and sanitation, life on land, and all those things. So I think this is something important. And a gist of the work what we have been doing over decades, with Indian Council of Agriculture Research, indicates that if you go with the conservation agriculture-based systems, that helps in improving the system's productivity by 5 to 10%. That saves on irrigation water ranging from 8 to 17%, and that's the average across the ecologies and the production systems. That addresses the issue of the labor, because that saves almost 50% of the labor, more than 50% of the energy, increase farmers' profit.
Sir, your voice is not coming, I think.
Disconnected or some issue with the network, I think so. I think disconnected. Let me talk with Yes, sir. Disconnect.
Sorry, I lost my connection in between, and let me reshare the slide because, sorry, you have to bear with me. I think I was here.
Yeah, now okay, sir. Now okay. Now correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I was here, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I was talking about how conservation agriculture has in building the resilience like this, and I also said I'll not be sharing the data on all those aspects, but there are plenty of literature and evidence available on these. Conservation agriculture helps in mitigating drought effects. The conservation agriculture helps in mitigating temperature stresses. And the excess water or the waterlogging, nutrient stress and salt stress, so that lead to building the resilience. Now, when we talk about the innovations, I think it's a continuous process, and I'm citing one example, that how innovations need the continued efforts, and so the happy journey has, starting 2002 to 2020, and in 2 it was started with the support from ICAR, with PAU and others, started developing, and then other programs and institutions keep innovating on those things. So you can see a complete story, and those evidence, whatever was developed, generated, led to a policy document through National Academy of Agricultural Sciences, and you can see the Institute Crop Residue Management Scheme, and you can see that it's moving, and there's a large adoption of these technologies. So if we are a project centric, and if we got a 3 years of the project, don't expect a lot of innovations are happening, because you need continuity. And that's where we say the research need continued investment, because without which it may not be successful. And in that respect, you can see this when everybody was looking towards profitable residue management alternatives to eliminate burning, and we did this analysis comparing all sort of options available to manage residues. We see that conservation agriculture with happy seeder was on the top, and which is more profitable and sustainable alternative. And the whole story from the perspective of the public cost and private cost, public benefit and private benefit, was published in 2019 in Science, titled at Fields on Fire: The Alternative to Crop Residue Burning in India. So if somebody is interested, can have a look on this paper. When we talk about innovations, I think we need to see good or bad. So the two machines, what we see, hosting, both are innovations, but on the left side, it's a happy seeder with no till, and the right side is a roto seeder with a rotary tillage mechanism that cannot operate in the full residues. So farmers are burning and then doing the roto seeding. And take this example of extreme climatic risk, 2014-15, where there was untimely excess rain, and you could see the wheat crop on the left side and right side. The right side one was badly impacted because of the ponding of water, less infiltration because of the compaction due to the rotary blades and things like that. So I think we need to think what kind of innovation we need to have for addressing the bigger challenges, not the quick fixes or the immediate one. Another example, in 2020-21, again, look at these two on the left side, the wheat field, and they are side by side. So it's happy seeder, it's conservation agriculture. On the right side is again the super seeder, again the rotary tillage mechanism, and all crop, because of the winds and rains, everything is lost. So I think we need to think what innovation is good and what innovation is bad, and what innovation addresses the bigger problems, and what innovation is addresses the immediate issues. So we need to think from that perspective. Also, we need to have these systemic innovations, and again I cite this example, from the Indo-Gangetic Plain regions perspective, that we need, when to have thinking and see, explore the windows of opportunity, and how can we reduce the climatic risk and produce more food and more nutritious food. So the example is, the government is talking, for example, there's a lot of focus on shorter duration rice varieties to address the issue of water, which are adopted. And that means they are vacating the field a bit early. So once fields are vacated, then you got an opportunity to advance your wheat. But then wheat may face the seedling stage heat stress. So what you need adapted wheat varieties and the management practices which can buffer the temperature and beat the the seedling stage heat. And that's where conservation agriculture comes into the picture. That helps in advancing your wheat crop, that helps in capturing the residual moisture, that helps in soil improvement and so many things, and buffers the terminal heat, because you escape the terminal heat because of advanced seeding. So if you can buy a window of 1 week after harvest of wheat, that can provide you an opportunity to have a shorter duration legume into the cropping system, because otherwise there's a shorter window and there is no chance of the legume. And that's why I say the systemic innovation, which is something very, very important. And you can see the example of the systemic innovation which got impact at a scale, for example, in India. And these 3 maps of Haryana and Punjab, the Northwest India, where wheat seeding advancement has been happening, from 2017-18 through 2019-20, the 3 years. You can see the left panel, you see only few areas where you see the green dots, and that's a window of wheat planting during October 24th through November 1st. But and you can see the middle one, you have more areas, and then you go further, you got much more. So it's happening because of the systemic innovation, which fits well in the early seeding, and you got conservation agriculture. So you combine the two, which are helpful, and it's adopted already in 1 million hectare in Northwest India, which is a significant acreage. Also, when we talk about those innovations, I think we need to redesign our agri-food systems, and the redesigning is something important. So I'll not go to a lot of details on this. If somebody is interested, there is a publication, with CSSRI here based on the work, and there are a lot of things and a lot of evidence on how redesigning of the food systems can help in addressing those challenges, the mega challenges what we are talking. And one of the examples is diversification opportunities with conservation agriculture. Not diversification per se, but diversification with conservation agriculture means sustainable intensification. So you got this conventional rice wheat system versus the other systems where you are reversing these graphs in terms of the yield and water. So here you see the yield is less, water use more. Here you got yield up and water use down. So that's what kind of innovations are needed when we talk about addressing the challenges. This is one example, and I used to cite everywhere, and I take it pride. And we started this one when I was at the Farming Systems Institute, that I'm project director for cropping systems research. But this is one of the example of impact at scale through science and partnership. I think that's what is something important, not science, but science and partnership together. And it's a kind of silent water revolution. You got 7 million hectares of acreage under laser leveling. This is one of the example of a business model or a technology-led business model. This is one of the example. People talk about a smallholder farmer, they are poor and all those things, but I think this is sophisticated and costly technological innovation, but is still adopted at large scale. And this is one of the best examples where farmers are putting or making investments in the technology without any incentives on the water. But this has led to impact at scale. So those who say our farmers are poor and uneducated, they cannot adopt technologies, can see this example. And because of this, our landscapes are looking like this. So this is a picture close to Karnal, we captured. You minimize the variability in the fields. So fields are looking more homogeneous, your crops are looking more homogeneous. And when we talk about precision ag, it's nothing but reducing the variability. So this is one way you can reduce the variability in the crop performance using technological advancements. Now there's another one, because I mentioned about the complicated effect of the COVID, and we did an analysis last year for Northwest India again, Haryana and Punjab, how COVID-mediated labor shortages are going to make our life complicated, not only from the perspective of planting delays and all those things, but also that planting delays can lead to lesser window between harvest of rice and planting of wheat. That means your burning peaks may shift towards more of a winter, lower temperature regimes, and that will make our life complicated because of the pollution. So that was an analysis made, and which was published in Agricultural Systems last year. And there were a lot of suggestions came. What are the solutions to address this? And I think that's where and this is the publication. You can see we did this district-wide analysis, and we see that making different scenarios, how much could be the potential yield loss and how much will be the income loss. And you can see with no action scenario, the projected loss was 13 to 35% in rice system, and leading to economic loss of $1.5 billion. But I think the government is very proactive. They are very wise, and they took immediate actions, and those actions are through conservation agriculture. So diversification a bit, but direct seeding of rice, conservation agriculture, happy seeder, to cope up, those labor shortage issues, which really help. So you could save because of these technological advancement, this much economic loss, which is quite significant. Also, though we've been talking about direct seeded rice, for example, over decades to address the issue of water, the soil health and other things, but it was not picking up. But because of the COVID crisis, I think the farmers thought of alternatives, and those alternatives are like direct seeded rice. And to capture the farmers' response, we did a survey with 1,600 plus farmers in Haryana and Punjab, and you can see 80 to 90% farmers say it's good to excellent performance of the direct seeded rice. Of course, this was first year, and it's progressing well. This year, Punjab reported more than 600,000 hectares of the direct seeded rice, which is quite significant. I think we all can take pride on it, how innovations are helping, not only addressing the issues of the natural resources, but also the bigger challenges like COVID. But I think in that process, we also need to think the complete picture. So we also try to capture the varietal spectrum under direct seeded rice and transplanting. And that's where there was some problem, because you can see the response of the farmers varied in Haryana and Punjab. Because Haryana got more of basmati rice fits well with the direct seeded rice, but transplanting, but the longer duration varieties, the coarse rice varieties are not very suitable for direct seeding, and that's why those who got those longer duration rice varieties ended up with a problem because yield penalty is there. So I think this is something important which was fed back to the strategy. We also need to think when we talk about, again, those kind of innovations, those just the micro irrigation or drip irrigation. And if you are with conservation agriculture, you got opportunity for putting your drip lines in the ground as a subsurface, which can really help in improving the nutrient use efficiency, improving the productivity, saving a lot of water. So those kind of, and also reducing the environmental footprint. So we also need to move further. So when you talk about all those portfolio of practices, I think we need to go further. So we are talking about a lot of digital agriculture and automations and IoTs and things like that. So the automation of drip irrigation, further adds value. We did then a synthesis which was published, this year in Advances in Agronomy on automation in drip irrigation for enhancing water use efficiency and how that can help. So if somebody is interested, can have a look on this. Also, in terms of the nutrient, as I said, this is another publication which came out on the crop nutrient management using nutrient expert. This is a tool which can improve yield, increase farmers' income, and also reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So contribute towards more of climate change, adaptation and mitigation both. Again, I'm not going to the details of those things. But I think once we have the technology targeting is something important. What goes where, what works where, and what situation. And for that, we need a lot of work on those things using the modeling or the big data science. And I think Anthony is going to talk a lot on these aspects. But just to cite an example of how those things helps, so that's from IGP. Especially from Eastern IGP, the wheat yield gaps in the IGP, and you can see, Punjab, you got some yield gaps like 14%, and if you go to Bihar, the yield gaps are like 56%. That's a total gap, and of those gaps, what is contributed by the weather? Punjab, there is no contribution. Haryana a bit, but if you go to Bihar, the 20% is because of the weather. So I think we need to target around that, and that's what was done by our colleagues, Balwinder and all. They done an ex-ante analysis on the early seeding of the wheat in Eastern Indo-Gangetic Plain, and using the technology targeting, which helped really, significantly in advancing the seeding of wheat in Eastern IGP, and that's why the productivity gains are there in the region. We also need to think about something on the data-driven agronomy, which really needs the integration of diverse types of the data. So I'm not going to the detail of this because Anthony, I'm sure, is going to have a lot of aspects on this data-driven agronomy in his presentation. Now, coming to the institutional innovations. So what we really need to redefine the rationale for the institutions and developing new relationship architecture within and across institutions. So I'm just underlining it, within institution and the across institutions. So if you talk about institutional innovation, you need to have innovation within your institutions to break the existing performance trade-off and expand the realm of what is possible through policies, through markets, through business models for scaling. I would like to cite this example, the innovative portfolio for addressing the food, energy, and water nexus, for example. Those are in isolation as of now. We are talking about micro irrigation, we are talking about conservation agriculture, we are talking about diversification, we are talking about solar systems, but I think, and automation. So I think we need to bring them together and then see from the perspective of the policy and investments. And that's what can help, so we can minimize those trade-offs and have more of the synergies and reorient our policies for scaling of those innovations. There's another example, and that's what we started doing, the carbon farming through regenerative agriculture. And that's the future of farming when we talk about the sustainability of agriculture, the adoption of regenerative agriculture practices, and also addressing the issues of the climate change. So we have to reap the carbon credits from agriculture, and that's what we started doing. So we need to create an enabling environment for additional investment for regenerative agriculture by the private sector, complementing the public investment to support the farmers. And the regenerative agricultural practices adopted due to the cash incentives if farmers are going to get, and the carbon marketplace, which is now a new norm and getting a lot of attractions for the investors around this. Now we did how from the policy perspective how this is going to help. So this is an example of farm level, how much additional income benefits of regenerative agriculture practices can be there through carbon trading. So if you take the example of the conventional rice wheat system and move towards more of conservation agriculture, the per hectare benefits because of the carbon trading can be like direct seeded rice, you got 1,300 rupees, you got zero till wheat or 1,650 rupees, you on the nitrogen saving, you got like 750 rupees. So altogether is making 3,700 rupees per hectare per year, which is a significant additional income to the farmer, in addition to saving 40 centimeters of water and saving more than 2,000 rupees per hectare on the energy cost. But when you go to the right side and diversify your rice and, for example, go for maize wheat system, those benefits could be more, 4,700, and those are conservative numbers. So I think, and again, but significant saving, so 40 to 140 centimeters of water and 15,000 rupees saving on electricity. And if you take the example of Punjab, this whole 15,000 is going from the government's pocket because its electricity is free. So I think those kind of things can help not only pushing the regenerative agriculture, but also creating a pull factor for adoption of the regenerative agriculture through incentivizing farmers. So if we consider, for example, 1.5 million hectares of area is translated into direct seeded rice and zero till wheat, and 500,000 hectares is translated into diversification, maize wheat system from conventional rice wheat system, you can see that can bring additional monetary benefit to the farmers to the tune of 800 crore rupees and save on 10 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, which is significant. So those numbers, so you can see those numbers, 10 million tons reduction in the GHG, 800 crores additional income for the farmer, 13 kilometer cubes of the reduction in the water usage, and 1,100 crore rupees saving on the energy cost for the electricity, and of course 155 crore rupees on the nitrogen fertilizer subsidies which government is putting. So those are the benefit, and that makes a business model because government is getting benefit on saving on electricity and nitrogen subsidy. The nature or the public is getting benefit in terms of the water, farmers is getting benefit in terms of getting additional income, and of course the whole lot of environmental aspects. We also need to have a lot of capacity development programs on that. That's what we have been doing. And whatever science evidence are generated, I think if you can translate them in terms of the policies and feed to the government, I think that helps for governments to prioritize the investment. So finally, the way forward is given the current and future natural resource scenario and projected climate change impacts, the agri-food systems need transformation through transitioning from a technology-centric classical efforts to more of systemic innovations. We need right diagnostics of the problems and developing solutions for targeted farming circumstances, which is a must for challenging the climate change. We have got a time to think about carbon farming, as I said, through incentivizing ecosystem services and move away from subsidy so that farmers can decide what they like. They got a freedom to choose. You provide them option. If you do this, you will get this. If you do this, you will get this. And if you do this, you will not get anything. So let them think what they want to use. But this needs institutional innovation and policy reorientation, which is happening. There are potential opportunities for raising the yield potential as well as adapting agricultural systems to climate change, but that need reorienting our research and focus from commodity centric approach or technology centric approach to more of systemic approach. And I cite the example of G by E by M, genotype by environment by management, which is important. we have to have the participatory on-farm validation and refinement so that we can have the backward and forward integration. And I think we need to have a strong focus on science of scaling. And I'm sure Anthony is going to talk a lot on science of scaling. But we need business models and social inclusivity. As one size doesn't fit all, need farming systems, typology-based targeting in different ecologies, for example, irrigated or rain-fed or rice fallows or hill ecosystem or arid ecosystems. So with this, I think, yeah, that's it. So thank you so much. And if you got some immediate questions, please let me know. Otherwise, I have to rush to the airport. Thank you.
Yeah, sir. Just
Thank you.
2 or 3
Thank you,
questions.
sir. Thank you, Dr. Jat, for your excellent presentation. Now, sir, we have 2 queries. One, what is the suitable option for implementing conservation agriculture in arid region where crop residue retention is not feasible because residue are valuable water resources and have extensive grazing system? That has been asked by V.S. Rathore, CAJR.
Or my problem, but seems like a problem.
Okay, sir.
Yeah,
Could you listen the question, sir?
yeah, no, I got your question. So someone is asking about how to go about conservation agriculture in the arid systems where biomass generation is a problem. I think we need to, again, we need to have, as I said, the situation, circumstance, specific strategy. It's not always necessary that you generate the biomass within the field and recycle it. You have to design a cropping system where you meet the needs of the soil cover as well as the animals. Also, when you go for conservation agriculture, because of the changed soil environment, you are going to increase the biomass production because of the moisture conservation. So whatever additional biomass you are producing, you can take off whatever you have been taking off, and that additional biomass you can recycle back. That will develop a system in itself, which helps. Also, you can have some shrubs and other biomass generating trees around your fields, and you can recycle that back. So there are ways and means, and if somebody is interested, we can have a detailed discussion on this. But there are ways and means. There are regions where, and Anthony comes from a region where rainfall is 200 millimeter in Australia, and conservation agriculture has been adopted, exponentially. So it's not like we have all the limitations, and that's the name of the game, because the flexibility, the principles will remain the same. The way you apply that depends on where you are. That's a sort.
The second query from Himanshu Pandey. He is asking how to manage weed in conservation agriculture.
Conservation agriculture itself minimizes the weed. So it works on the philosophy of not managing the weeds, but managing the weed seed bank. And I can share a paper which is coming from a long-term research, how there is a reduction in the weed flora over time. And you can go and talk to the farmers who have been doing conservation agriculture for a few years. They don't need even herbicide application because weeds are not there, because weeds are sitting down there in the soil. But if you are not exposing them to the proper environment, they will not generate, right? So you have to exhaust the weed seed bank. And of course, the integrated management that include the herbicides, and depends what kind of history of the field you got, what kind of cropping system. But all the solutions are available in terms of weed management. I don't see any serious issue on the weed management.
Sir, third query from Tiwariji, and he is asking when our agriculture extension will focus on what consumer need and then promote production of that crop with reference to India. That is not much. What our agriculture extension will focus on what consumer need, he is asking, and then promote production of that crop with reference of India.
That's why I say we need to have an agri-food systems approach. So the agri-food system is not from the perspective of the production, but production to consumption. That includes the consumer. we have to see what is required and for the consumers. And then within that, you have to design a system and you have to focus. So it should not be like a top-down approach, but mix of the bottom-up and top-down. And that's what is needed from the extension researchers. So, yeah.
Sir, I am taking one more query only because you are in hurry. Though there are so many questions are coming from participant. So one participant, Sushil Ahmed, is asking, sir, how can we practice conservation agriculture in agroforestry system like cover cropping with potential forage in fruit orchards?
Yeah, there is a fantastic opportunity. And other day I was having a detailed discussion with director of the agroforestry institution. There's a whole lot of opportunity in the agroforestry systems. Only thing is you have to have a cropping system which fits well within the agroforestry systems. What kind of the trees you got, and you see the side effects. So in the beginning, when your trees are smaller, then you can have some crops which fits well. The later when they grows up, then there may be a side effect. All the crops may not like that. So you have to have the crops and variety which are adapted to those systems. So you have to design a system depending on the crop and the trees. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Dear participants, for your questions, we will accumulate them and will send to you, sir, if you wish, to our mail. Then query can be submitted.
Thank you, sir, for accepting.
Now it is hand over to Dr. A.L. Meena for further program.
Thank you very much, sir. And thank you, ML Dart, sir. Now, I would like to invite our second speaker, Dr. Anthony Whitebread. Dr. Anthony Whitebread is Research Program Director of Innovation Systems for Dryland and the country representative of Tanzania with ICAR-IIFSR. With a PhD from University of New England in Soil Science and Agronomy, Professor Bread now leads a diverse team of scientists across the South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa in an innovation systems mode, devising strategies to manage the climate risk, soil fertility, and identifying market-lead development opportunities. Anthony's expertise covers agronomy and soil science, farm systems, analysis, crop modeling, climate risk management, spatial analysis focused on research for development in smaller farming systems. So, sir, I welcome you for your presentation on behalf of our institute and on behalf of our organizing committee. Dr. Breed, please.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Good. All right. I'd like to thank firstly Dr. L.R. Meena, Head of Department for the Indian Institute of Farming System Research, for the invitation. And also I'd like to acknowledge Dr. Subhash, who I've worked with since 2014 and for the invitation as well. Today I'll talk about, I think it's very complementary to ML Jat's presentation. I'll talk about managing agricultural landscapes and climate risk for the semi-arid in India. And a lot of this work is done in collaboration with ICAR, with the Indian Council of Agricultural Research, particularly CREDA in Hyderabad. And we've also been supported a lot with monsoon mission funding and collaboration with the Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology and the Indian Meteorological Department. And I'll come back to those colleagues. Also, our colleagues in CCAFS, PK Agrawal and others in Delhi have really supported our work over many years. I'm just presenting this work on behalf of the team, many of whom sit in Hyderabad, particularly Shalanda Kumar, KPC Rao, Ramaraj, and many other colleagues. Don't seem to be able to change. Okay, I'll take you through over the next 30 minutes or so a little bit about climate risk and agriculture. And I'm coming back to these two terms, how we manage risk in dryland systems, particularly both tactically and strategically. I think most of the audience understand what I mean by tactical management, because that's a lot of our business of extension. And once we get into adaptation, we start to talk about co-designing farming systems. I think ML Jat started touching on that in the last parts of his presentation. As you know, I think ICAR-IIFSR is a CG center that has been based in Hyderabad since 1972, and it's very complementary to the other institutes such as IRI and CIMMIT in India. Our work focuses very much on the drylands, the semi-arid tropics, and we work right across South Asia, mostly India, but we have a presence in at least 15 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. I'm now based in Tanzania, in Dar es Salaam, which is in Eastern Southern Africa, and I work right across the whole region, particularly in West Africa. I still lead the program. I still have a lot of connection with Hyderabad, and my intention, once quarantine is not an issue, I'll start traveling back and forth a lot more than I have been able to in the last year. Our crops are very much around the legumes, as you know, chickpeas, pigeon pea, and groundnuts, and these nutri-cereals, sorghums, millets, and finger millet. But also the farming systems. It's not just about the crops, it's about the farming systems. ML Jat gave a very nice introduction in terms of the challenges we're facing of climate change, population increase, and the many pressures on Indian systems. So I won't go over those. I'll just say that there are a number of other drivers occurring that we have to be aware of in our work. Rural India is a rapidly urbanizing society. And by 2050, we're looking at a rural population, a rural urban population of about 50%, 50-50. So 50% of people will live in urban settings. There's also rapid changes in land use, land condition across India due to this huge population that India has, almost 1.4 billion, which is amazing. We're facing the weather patterns changing, the start of the monsoon, more common mid-season droughts and extreme events. And I think in the last 18 months in particular, we've continued to face rural distress and some agrarian crisis. India is in a fortunate position that it has strong government, and many programs are aimed at investing life into the statement that Gandhi ji made: the soul of India lives in its villages. And there's a couple of images of mine and the wonderful experiences I've had in many Indian villages in the southern parts of India. But farmers, particularly in the semi-arid, face huge risks. They come from pest and disease, inputs, prices, markets, storage, and climate risk. And I'll focus a fair bit on climate risk now because I think it is one of the biggest disincentives for investment into technologies that will decrease risk and improve productivity. And this is common from where I grew up in low rainfall Southern Australia, but also for the areas right across semi-arid India and right across sub-Saharan Africa. So we have two ways of coping with climate risk. One is the tactical. This is the management, the agronomic management that we often have in our extension advice: timing of planting, selection of crops, and nowadays crop insurance, perhaps forward selling and contracts, and increasingly climate knowledge and these new technologies such as the IoTs and connected sensors and precision agriculture. But there's also the strategic, and I think that's probably a bit more the topic of the seminar I'm presenting, which is alternate cropping systems for climate change and resource conservation. And I don't think we've really done too much on the strategic. It's a lot about redesigning farming systems, which I think needs three aspects. One, understanding historical and the future climate. And we can do this partly through modeling scenario analysis. And Subhash was involved in the AgMIC program, which very much looked at using models and engaging stakeholders to try and redesign cropping systems and agricultural systems in general. The second part, it has to be co-designed. So it has to be developed in partnership with the stakeholders, farmers, the consumers, and the policymakers, government. And the third major area, I think, about redesigning farming systems is bringing the infrastructure and the institutions to enhance that capacity, that adaptive capacity. It's very slow to change. Okay. So yeah, I think the audience also knows this challenge of climate anomaly, sorry, in India. Here's a record from 1870 through to 2014. And if you look at when the CG centers were formed, this is in the late 1960s, early 1970s, here we have these terrible series of very significant rainfall anomalies in that period, some associated with these El Nino signals and some not El Nino driven. And this led to a lot of innovation in the Indo-Gangetic Plain and perhaps the Green Revolution. In fact, this dry period did continue right through to the middle of the 1980s and early 1990s. But these days, we do have some fantastic climate information products available with IATM and IMD doing a fantastic job on a whole range of forecasting tools from short range, 3-4 days, which have very high application to agricultural decisions and fairly good resolution, 9 kilometers down to 3 kilometers. We have the medium range forecast up to 10 days. Again, very high relevance to agricultural decisions available at a block level. We have extended range forecasts, less reliable as you get into these extended range forecasts. They have some application to agriculture and they're at the district level. So we need them actually at lower levels than that. We need them at the block level as well. And then we have these seasonal climate forecasts, which are 3 to 4 months out, and they're often issued in April and May in India each year. These also have moderate to high use in agricultural decisions. They're available at a country level, but we need much higher resolution of seasonal climate forecasts to make them more useful. And IATM is working on this. We need them at district or even lower possible resolutions. These can be used, particularly these seasonal climate forecasts, although they're unreliable. They can be used in forward planning, particularly around selection of crops, allocation, investment decisions. But the challenges, as I said, is reliability. Despite this, we've developed a set of tools in association with the partners I mentioned earlier to try and bring together historical and weather analysis, we call this kind of data analytics, together with the forecasting capabilities that are at the range of resolutions that I just showed. We've developed these into messages and then put them into dissemination channels such as SMS and other ICT type forms of dissemination. We've done a lot of this work in Anantharapur, which is one of the driest areas, I think, and the most challenging areas in India to manage climate risk. And we developed this automated messaging system called ISAT, capable of generating and disseminating weather-based farm advisories. The sort of analytics can be very simple. Here we have a weather record, and where the red circles are showing you dry spells of 4 weeks or more during 2 sorts of threshold periods. Less than 300, you can see many dry spells in those different years. And when you have seasons of greater than 400, much, much less incidence. So already this historical analysis gives us a tip on what the threshold is and what sorts of decisions we should start to make when we have these sorts of risks in seasons that are lower than 300 millimeters. We built this into a kind of decision tree model, which combined this analysis along with the signals that La Nina, the ENSO events are giving us. And we developed these into sorts of decision trees. And these messages are then generated based on probability. Here's an average message number 3, which is on this decision tree. Number 3 is here. So we're going through long-term forecast is below normal. It's an El Nino year. It's coming to message 3. So the message that went out to farmers in the local language was average rainfall in these years is less than 250 millimeters, a very high chance of getting dry spells. And then there's some advice about considering the planting mix of crops to minimize risk. So this is a pre-season message. But once you're into the season, there's a whole range of messages that we developed through this decision tree support system. And again, it goes through a decision tree approach, looking at rainfall of last week, the next week forecast, and the 2-week outlook. And then it takes us to a set of messages. And we're relying very much on observed rainfall data from different stations, state level, APS, DSP levels, but also the forecast from IMD, and also the 2-week outlooks. These messages then step through from the weeks 23 to 39, which is the whole period of the cropping season. And there are a whole range of messages that are developed depending on the whole range of conditions or management options that the farmer may need to face. I won't go into too much detail because I think many understand the use of advisories in farm management, but we found that very much planning pre-season, sowing time, and particularly harvesting, which was a little bit of a surprise to me, was important from the utilization of agricultural advisories. And our interventions led to quite a significant change in the mix of crops at the farm level. In this case, you can see that groundnut, pulses, and other crops were much more evenly planted, whereas the control villages remained with this groundnut dominance. And again, we found positive crop productivity in most cases, comparing the treatment and control villages and the farmers that were using advisories against control farmers that were not, up to about 56% increased productivity. And these systems were tested over 3 years. And by 2020, we found that 80% of the farmers rated the advisories as 4 and above out of a scale of 5. So they were well received. But that's on a small scale. How do we scale these sorts of advisory systems that combine agricultural advice with climatic information? And we were commissioned with partners to develop this next-gen AgroMet advisory system. And we're just finishing a project with CREDA, IATM, and IMD. And we've developed a dashboard that integrates data from different sources and facilitates data analysis and visualization. And the aim has been to develop AgroMet advisories that are more scientific and more evidence-based. We've gone through this process that I just mentioned for the ISAT model. We've collected data, we've done the analytics, but now the dashboards start to make this information available as a more or less a one-stop shop for extensionists right across the country to visualize, to help them interpret climate information. And we're trying to add almost an automated or a suggested decisions advisory message based on a set of triggers. And so these messages will be then modified by their local extension officer. So we've developed this system. There's a few screenshots below of the sorts of dashboard features that are there. Here we have an example of the dashboard where for a site, in again, this case is Ananth Rapport, it's pulling data from various sources, mostly public sources from IMD, ITM, and the state level sources. And this has resulted in a big collaboration between those institutes. And so ICAR-IIFSR has kind of played a role as a knowledge broker, bringing these institutes and their data flows together for the first time. And so we've created this dashboard that integrates the data from multiple sources and then facilitates data analysis and visualization. And generates, in the end, our aim is to generate these sorts of suggested automated messages that then the extension officers can use. So there's been some major outcomes from this whole body of work. We've developed this MegDo app. It's a pan-India-wide app that reflects the data flows that are coming out of IMD, and it also pulls in the agro advisories of IMD and ICAR system throughout India, and you can download MegDo, which is this first one here, on the Play Store. More recently, there was a development of Malsum, which is another mobile app. It's more aimed at urban dwellers to grab information and warn of extreme events. So these are two apps that are available now pan-India, and they've been downloaded more than 500,000 times already since their release last year. The initial story I told you about the Intelligent Systems Advisory Tool, ISAT, it helped us understand how you bring together data flows. And we developed this with Microsoft India. So that very much helped us understand the design of these systems and the dashboards. And this has now been put together in this dashboard. The second part of my talk in the last 15 minutes or so is a little bit more on strategic or transformational change in agricultural systems. And I'll present just an example. It's focused on the Telangana state, where of course, ICAR-IIFSR is based, which was erstwhile Andhra Pradesh. In about 2014, it changed. Rain-fed farming systems in Telangana state are increasingly affected by high climate variability, but the current efforts on climate-smart agriculture are limited. And we find that climate adaptation, and mainstreaming in India is happening. And we have kind of three different levels of this happening. We have national action plans that have been developed. We have state action plans on climate change that have been developed. And we have local adaptation plans, plans of action. And I think it's fair to say that at these higher levels, the plans are there, but at the lower levels, this integration into district and sub-district plans of various departments is still yet to happen in a major way. There's high awareness and good intentions, but so far, limited action on the ground. So this project, which was funded by CCAFS, was an attempt to overcome some of these issues, and it was connected also to the NIFCC, this National Adaptation Fund for Climate Change that was led by the EPTRI. Our first work on this was led by Dakshina Murthy, who developed a fantastic framework for mapping climate, a climate index at the Mandal level. I think this is the first Mandal level analysis of climate. And this shows you the current situation, Mandal-wise climate exposure index for baseline climate for all the Mandals across Telangana. And so they're showing you the risky areas, which are obviously in red, and these areas of Nalgonda and Mabuknagar and other places, through to these more favorable, less risky areas in the green. If we look forward to 2050, we find big changes. Changing again. Sorry, the slide is not changing now. Yeah. This is a mid-century 2050 scenario with RCP 8.5. And you see a lot more red if I just go back, hopefully. You see a lot of the Mandals are starting to come into these highly risky situations. Even areas over here where Telangana, where Hyderabad and ICAR-IIFSR is based, Medak district and Sangareddy, they start to come in and a really high risk area right through the middle. And Adilabad in the northern part, highly, highly risky. So this has a great way of visualizing the sorts of climatic changes that we're likely to face over the next 30 years. And this gives us some lead time to be adapting our systems towards these enhanced risk and extreme events that we will face. Now, there's a long process for doing this. And I said something about co-design before. We have a whole range of climate smart agricultural practices, many of which are actually subsidized and promoted right across the state, and often very clumsily implemented at the state level. So our work has been very much about trying to move this towards a much more locally based planning methodology. And we call this the participatory prioritization of climate smart agriculture. So our program was very much about going through this process of establishing the options, identifying criteria for where you might apply different climate smart agricultural practices, using expert opinion to score and weight those, and then using sensitivity analysis and multi-criteria analysis to prioritize these climate smart agricultural practices. And Dr. Shailendra Kumar led much of this work. We developed indexes for understanding the different aspects of implementing different climate smart agricultural options. These are mostly at the farm level, and I think they're familiar to many of you: in situ moisture conservation, micro irrigation, rainwater harvesting, different rotations, the introduction of drought tolerant cultivars, down to mechanization, down to shelter for animals and crop insurance. And we develop these indexes to try and understand, firstly, how easy they are to implement, through to what sorts of capital and finance might be required to implement each of these different ones. For instance, the first one, rainwater harvesting, which would be on-farm ponds, for example, is highly finance and capital intensive, and also requires quite a bit of machinery or mechanization to implement. Through to capacity building, market linking and infrastructure. These are all developed, these indices were all developed with various experts from government and from private sector. And Shailendra and team, they've published 2 papers in land use policy, and there's been a paper in IFPRI just recently, looking at this trade-off between risk and return. And here they found that if we're on this path of traditional farmer practice here, or versus this path of using climate smart agriculture, and this is risk, as risk increases on this axis and state income increases on this axis, we're getting to the same state income with climate smart agriculture. But if we stay with the farmer practice, we're actually getting to the same income, but at double the risk, or even more than double the risk. So there's a range of tools that we can use at the state level to assess this risk return framework. At a more, perhaps more practical level, we can do this Mandel level analysis, where different technologies can be assessed at the different Mandel levels. For instance, broad bed and furrow, ridge and furrow systems, residue incorporation, the incorporation of drip irrigation systems, and farm ponds. And see, here we have the additional returns from these different potential technologies in rupees. The sorts of blues means, these blue colors mean that the returns are very, very high. For instance, down here, farm ponds are returning high levels of returns, down to very low levels of returns in these other colors. Again, the same example is here for drip irrigation through to mechanized rice transplanting. It's not changing again. And finally, this is just a little bit more in-depth analysis for farm ponds, because farm ponds has been a well-promoted adaptation at the farm level right across Telangana. And it has been rolled out in many of the areas which probably have fairly low returns for farm ponds. And here we're looking at alternative cropping systems in 6 districts, if we choose alternative crops in Mambuknagar and other places, and connecting farm ponds with these sorts of crops that have higher returns when they are able to access irrigation, such as mangoes and sapota and tomatoes. And so again, we find that farm pond return is much higher in this part of Telangana. This one is an example of potential net returns from the adoption of CSA. Again, it's a similar example as I just showed, but at the district level. If we then start overlaying the sorts of land use that we have currently, so we're using GIS tools to understand where different crop types are planned and actually implemented in Telangana currently. And we start to overlay the sorts of infrastructure that we have in Telangana. And this is an example of all the command irrigation areas right across the middle part of Telangana. We can understand the sorts of land use that is happening currently and the sorts of land use that we need to adjust towards a more sustainable agricultural system, considering the future climate. And so this was published recently also by Dakshina Murthy, who works for UNGRAL now. So I've tried to take you through two examples of a tactical approach to risk management. So this is the kind of here and now. How do we help farmers with the inherent variability of climate? And I showed you an example of decision tree approaches by combining forecasts, weather analytics, and agro advisory information. And we need high resolution meteorological and soils data and forecasts to do this properly. So that's the key criteria to roll out this sort of information. We need to concentrate on looking at analytics of historical weather information, knowing the farming system well. We need to realize that forecasts are probabilistic and they need to be communicated well to farmers. And we need to also understand that seasonal forecasts, currently the skill is often low when the decisions are made. Despite all these limitations in our current systems, we find that combining forecast systems and agricultural advisory systems as an excellent way forward. And we've produced this dashboard in collaboration with our ICAR partners and IMD and ITM. We've also developed this evidence-based decision framework and assessment tool for trying to guide future investments in climate smart agriculture for Telangana state. And the purpose is to change policy in Telangana, but also using this as a framework for other states in India. So once again, I'd like to just acknowledge the colleagues and the partner institutions that we work with very closely, including CREDA, UNGRAL, and IIPM, and also our support from ITM, IMD, and CCAFS. Thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you, sir. Now we can go for the queries.
We don't have much query, but one Dr. Lalan Sharma has appreciated you for your good presentation. It is good information in area of climate forecasting. It seems that your presentation is very clear, sir. People have understood very well. So there is no question, but he is appreciating you, Lalan Sharma, Dr. Lalan Sharma, for your good information and area of climate forecasting. Thank you, sir, very much.
And sir, few of the participants have asked if possible, and if you can share, then they are asking about the presentation also, if it is possible, and if you can share.
Yeah, sure. It's with Dr. Subhash, so he can pass it on to you. Just write to Dr. Subhash or write to myself is fine.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Now, sir, we received one query, sir. Hello.
Yes.
Yes, sir, continue.
Dr. Anthony, we received much query. We have number one, Lalan Sharma has also asked, we have number of technologies in agriculture production system from conservation agriculture to carbon farming, but very farmers are aware of it and field level it not so effective? How we can make effective?
So the farmers are aware, well, the technologies are available. So the question is, how do we make farmers more aware of the sorts of technologies from conservation agriculture? Well, yeah, that's the job of ICAR and the various state extension systems, and of course the CG system. Our role is to make farmers aware, to work with farmers participatively, and use new technology to reach more farmers more quicker with this information. So I think embracing some of these digital tools helps us reach the huge numbers of farmers in India, which is already an incredible number of more than, 200 million farmers. It's an amazing challenge, but I think we now have some of the technologies that can help us reach those farmers with this sort of information. Yeah, farmers in India and many other parts of the developing world face many of these challenges related to farm size, of course. As farm size goes down, the economies of scale, for instance, of technologies like conservation agriculture are a limitation. From my own country, where conservation agriculture has been adopted by more than 90% of cropping farmers, it's on the basis of labor saving, economies of scale, and its connection to environmental outcomes, which are much better under conservation agriculture. In India, you have, of course, many limitations to adopting highly capital intensive technologies. But again, digital applications, new business models, aggregation may give us the opportunity to scale such technologies even in smallholder situation. So I'm hopeful that gives us a kind of game changer in the context of smallholder farming. Yeah, thank you.
Sir, one fellow has asked, is it possible to give real-time weather forecasting to farmers?
Yes. Well, in terms of short range weather forecasts, they're released with a 3 or 4 or 5 day lead time, and they're available virtually in real time. As farmers get access to mobile phones and even smartphones, these apps make the data available in the local language. So the example I gave of Megdood is available already in 12 Indian languages, and it's connected to the agro advisories for that region. So yes, it is available. Digital tools are starting to make that available to the huge numbers of farmers that need access to it.
Sir, one more query only, last one. Drumstick crop having much potential in conservation of ecosystem, being a very drought hardy crop in semi-arid region.
Sorry, what was the crop?
Actually, drumstick crop
having much potential in conservation of ecosystem. He is telling, sir, drumstick crop having much potential in conservation of ecosystem, being a very drought hardy crop in semi-arid region. He is asking, but it is not clear what he want to tell. He has only written like this.
Okay, I can't really comment. Maybe someone else, Subhash or someone, can comment on that one.
Okay. Yeah, Subhash sir, you want to say something?
Yeah, Dr. Anthony, thank you very much for your nice presentation. And I have 2 questions. One is, what about the accuracy of gridded data in probability analysis? That is one question. And second one is, as you told, incentives are needed to promote CSA. So how many years we need to provide them? Suppose we are providing incentives to 1 or 2, 3 years. After that, what will be the condition? What we will do? These are the 2 questions.
Okay, they're hard questions. Gridded data is extremely useful in analyzing patterns at a fairly broad level. I would say often not at the farm level. So when you're looking at farm decision making, gridded data is often not very useful unless you bias correct. So you need to downscale the data using local weather station information. And there's a number of papers around that to show how that's possible. But I think gridded data is extremely useful as a component of our analysis, so we must use it. The second question about incentives, maybe I'm not the right person, I'm not a policymaker, but yeah, incentives are extremely important, particularly in India, incentives to adopt all sorts of technologies, 50 to 100% subsidies on irrigation products, 50 to 100% subsidies on fertilizer. But once you have the subsidies and the incentives, it's very hard to withdraw, and it becomes a political challenge to do that. I think I'm not the right person to say, but I think targeting those incentives more intelligently, not so broad. So the examples I gave from Telangana, targeting them actually at a lower level, even at a Mandal and lower level of resolution, will help us target those incentives much more effectively. For instance, the farm ponds can be targeted to certain parts of Telangana and connected then to certain crops or systems that will benefit from farm ponds, rather than making that subsidy available basically statewide. So yeah, that's the message, I think. So thanks for that question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, one more question is there, sir. DVS Reddy from Matari. The weather forecast in tropical countries is not very accurate as compared to the temperate regions. What could be the possible reasons for that?
Look, I think it's multiple reasons. One is the much less resolution of station data, and in Africa, particularly where I'm working, the resolution and the history of climate weather station information is just not available. So that's why we have to go to these gridded products often to give us actually base level information. Also, the sorts of weather systems that are here, they're monsoon driven, they're often convective systems, they're very hard to predict. Whereas temperate systems to some extent are much easier to predict, they're much less variable climate systems. And the amount of study that has gone into the temperate systems is far more analytics than the tropical systems. But that's changing very quickly. I think there's a lot of collaboration with the World Meteorological Organization and many other regional institutes or regional bodies. And I think India is a great example where IITM and IMD have made so much progress in the last 10 years. And they're a world-class institution. They're publishing nature papers regularly around these topics. But Africa, many of the states in Africa are a long way behind in this respect. But I think the next 10 to 20 years will change that entirely. There's so much investment going into improving weather systems, so much interest from advanced research institutes from Europe and US. And there's also World Bank really interested in getting information from weather systems back into the agro advisories, even for sub-Saharan Africa. So our program is very much focusing on this at the moment. Thanks for the question.
Thank you very much, sir. So we have reached to the final stage of this international webinar conference. Now, for summing up formally, I would like to invite Dr. Prakash for a formal vote of thanks. Dr. Prakash, please.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon to one and all present here. It is an honor for me to get the opportunity to propose formal vote of thanks on the behalf of ICAR-IIFSR and organizing committee. I extend my gratitude to our today's keynote speakers, Dr. Emil Jart from CIMMYT and Dr. Anthony from ICAR-IIFSR, for accepting our request on very short notice and sharing their experience and valuable information on conservation agriculture and climate smart agriculture in irrigated as well as semi-arid region with all of us. I hope it will provide guidance in synthesis and formulation of our future research program and improvement of existing program to all our fellow participants. I would like to thank all the participants for joining during this international webinar conference and for active involvement in question and answer session. A special thanks to Dr. A.S. Pawar, Director ICAR-IIFSR for providing immense support, inspiration, and encouragement to make this international webinar conference successful. I extend my gratitude to Dr. L.R. Meena, Head Cropping System and Resource Management Division, and Dr. N. Subhas to organize this international webinar conference and providing opportunity to all of us to interact with globally renowned researchers. I must thank the organizing team, namely Dr. Lalit Kumar, Dr. Amritlal Meena, Dr. Nirmal, and Dr. Sunil Kumar for working hard for past few days and night to make this event successful. I thank all who have contributed directly or indirectly for successful organization of this international webinar conference. Once again, thank you one and all for making it a grand success. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Prakash. So thank you all the present dignitaries and participants. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we can close